Hey listeners, Chris Godey here with some bonus business insight before we jump into today's episode. If you're looking for the right place to host your next business gathering, conference, or event, look no further than Orlando, Florida. It's no coincidence that Maxwell Leadership hosts our biannual International Maxwell Conference in Orlando. Between its many luxurious hotels, meeting spaces, and venues, Orlando is the perfect place for you and your team to gather, collaborate, and grow. Whether you're traveling for business or bringing your company for a meeting, there's a reason Orlando is as much a business capital as an entertainment one. And let's not forget the delicious cuisine at one of the 46 Michelin-rated restaurants where your team can kick off your evenings. So before you plan your next business event, check out Orlando, where the possibilities for business travel are unbelievably real.
Welcome to the Maxwell Leadership Executive Podcast, where our goal is to help you increase your reputation as a leader, increase your ability to influence others, and increase your ability to fully engage your team to deliver remarkable results. Hi, I'm Perry Holly, a Maxwell Leadership Facilitator and Coach.
And I'm Chris Godey, Executive Vice President with Maxwell Leadership. Welcome and thank you for joining. Perry and I want to continue to encourage you to take these lessons, give them to your team, and then, man, when you have your weekly team meetings, just go around the first 5 minutes, say, what was your number one takeaway? And begin to have conversations and leadership development. We hear so many people that talk about how it's a tool that they use, and so we're grateful to be able to do that.
I got a new coaching client. He was a CEO, and he said, I want you to coach these 3 people on my team. And I got on, I said, what do you know about the 5 levels? Well, we were required to listen to your first 5 podcasts. I flinched. I go, imagine how bad those were.
Yeah. As we just talked about before we started, right? We're on number 287. So the first 5 had to be horrible.
I don't know. I don't want to go find out.
No, it had to be bad.
But that was their first introduction to me. Hello, I'm Perry.
Yeah. Good news is nowhere to go but up, right? So you're in good shape as you're now starting to coach them. But man, listen, if you want to download the Learner Guide and even be a part of that and that learning process, I want to encourage you to go to maxwellleadership.com/podcast, click on this episode, and you can find the Learner's Guide there. Well, we're going to talk about something today that I've worked with leaders that I think run to this, maybe cause it. I think I've seen others that avoid it, and then I've seen some lead through it really well. And so we're going to talk about why leaders need to address conflict. They need to address it. And we were talking about an HBR article just recently where it stated that employee conflict resolution will be a must-have skill set for managers or leaders in the future. And they referenced in that article a 2023 Gartner survey where it found 57% of managers say they are fully responsible for managing and resolving team conflicts. And so I thought about that for a minute, and I said, what about the other 43%? Like who? And that may be just they don't know what they don't know, and that's fine. But if you're listening, and part of our audience, we want to make sure you know we're going to have to address this. And so if you can effectively do that and you can navigate through that, I think that's going to set not only your leadership at a different level, but I think the team and the individuals that you're working with, and it's going to have a huge, huge impact on the culture and in your organization.
Yeah, and the HBR article referenced that this year, the years we're in now, that just the amount of challenge and turmoil in the world and crises that are happening and geopolitical issues, labor strikes, climate change, pushback to DEI efforts, upcoming elections, half the globe, that conflict is poised to be at an all-time high. And so if you have a conflict between employees, between yourself and an employee, but especially between employees themselves, it pulls down both that individual and the whole team. And it can really make for an unsafe workplace. People don't want to be engaged. They're afraid to speak up. There's all kind of negatives. So the question like this, that do leaders feel like they are trained and prepared to resolve conflict when it happens?
Yeah, I think that we don't do enough of this. Matter of fact, let me back up. We don't even train our people that we're promoting and putting in leadership positions, leadership skills. And that's a competency of leadership skills, being able to do this. And so one of the things we have here at Maxwell Leadership is we offer a course around that is how do we resolve conflict? What does that look like? And if you're interested in that, or maybe you think you need to send that to somebody. I'm not saying send it to your boss. That might not be the best career move, but you may say, hey, we need to go and take a look at this course. I would encourage you just visit the website that we talked about and Perry will mention in closing at the end to be able to learn more about that. But in that course, right, I love this opening kind of exercise that you do and you take people through. And so we sit in groups, right? We're at the tables and you say, I want everybody to come to an agreement of the top 5 movies of all time. And so you go through this and, everyone has a point of view. Again, credit you for your statements in my head all the time, which is like when somebody says something like, well, I have a point of view, but I'd like to hear yours first, right? Everybody's got a point of view. And very rarely have you seen people agree on all 5.
Never.
Yeah, never. And so the point of it is to produce that conflict, right? To drive it at the table, to set some of the training that we're going to go through, and everybody has a difference of opinion. So my question to you, as you have navigated, facilitated, led leaders, led people through those conversations, is that conflict good? Is it bad? Is conflict in general good or bad? Like, what are your thoughts and takeaway from those conversations?
That's a definite. It depends. That's funny on that exercise. I was just walking the tables and listening, and one person says, well, definitely, absolutely, Star Wars has to be on that list. And somebody else says,
disagree with that.
I have never seen it. And then that caused conflict. Like, how in the world could you?
What rock have you been under?
And then several other people said they'd never seen it. I thought it was a really interesting dynamic of stop assuming I'm like you.
Yeah.
And then, but we're gonna rub each other in the wrong way. But conflict or disagreement, that sort of thing, can promote collaboration. It can improve performance. It can foster innovation. It can build deeper relationships because we feed off of each other, even though we disagree. There are things that can help with that. I've heard Brene Brown. She actually uses a term she says she wants her team to rumble, and so she promotes active conflict. A disagreement to say we're going to rumble on a topic. So she intentionally wants the team to get everybody's point of view on the table and let's rumble about this. So it is healthy conflict.
Yeah.
A lot of what the HBR article and where we're kind of thinking where leaders need to step in is when it becomes unhealthy, unresolved differences cause disruptions in the workforce, that they decrease productivity, project failure, absenteeism, turnover, all kinds of negative things. If there's emotional stress happening, then it needs to be addressed. If people are retching over, we can't get along, we can't work together, our disagreements are so strong, we've got to address that. But, start thinking as a leader, maybe before I think about resolving conflict, can I, in fact, are there things as a leader I could do to avoid unhealthy conflict? What do you think about that? Can you guide people into healthy conflict only?
I think you can try. You kind of had me.
Gosh, I
don't know, man.
Family could see
that was
your face.
Yeah. I mean, I think you can try, but man, can I let everybody in on a secret? When there's people involved, personally or professionally, okay, disputes, disagreements, tension is going to happen, and I think it's not always going to be healthy. I think you can do a better job of setting the team up and leading them to be able to have, like you think about Brene Brown talking about the rumble. It's that common language that everybody knows. When we rumble, we're going to do it in a certain way, right? There's always going to be guidelines to do that. And so I think, 2 words here is what is the culture and what is the communication? What does the culture allow and is accepted and wants? And then how do we communicate about it? What is the common language? I love the Brene example because that rumble word means something to their team differently than what outside people think, and that's
it's both. It's their culture and
it is their culture. That's right.
Yeah.
So if you're designing a culture, and by the way, let me stop right there. You need to understand this. Your culture's happening one way or another. So we would prefer you design it.
You can't not have a culture.
You can't not have a culture.
Default
and so
or design.
If you're designing it, we want to make sure that you're designing it around some core values And they will then determine kind of who we are and how we do things. And that goes back to, again, the culture and the communication thing. If you got to do it by designing it. And so I just want to encourage you is we got to have clear and frequent communication, and that will help head off some of the conflict, okay? But you're still going to have it. And a lot of times the negative conflict, or maybe some of the healthy conflict, comes from really just confusion and a little bit of a misunderstanding. There's a gap there that we got to close.
Yeah, I love these two words. I think you're spot on, and that, as you say, core values really drive behavior of the audience, of the team, of the unit, organization. We talk about it when we teach this, that in our course about culture is defined by three things: how people think, how people act, and how people interact. And so when you're thinking about, we have conflict going on, what are our core values? Do we have values that are directing how people think, how they act, their behaviors, and how do they interact with each other? Maybe it's also, I think communication is the key to all of that, but maybe we should also distinguish between, there's a lot written about conflict. We're talking about conflict resolution, but there's also conflict management. How do you see the difference in conflict management and conflict resolution?
Yeah, so conflict management is dealing with conflict without necessarily resolving the issue. Right. You're managing it. It's just you're passive to it. You're allowing it to happen, and you're just kind of managing them through it. Whereas conflict resolution is working together, still happening, but to create a solution that satisfies the needs and the concerns of both parties, right? So many leaders will prefer the conflict management side, because it appears easier in the moment. But it does have long-term challenges, and it's going to be hard, and it doesn't go away. It's going to show back up, and it may get worse. And so you need to make sure that you're working to resolve it. Whereas the conflict resolution, if it's done correctly, it won't even damage the trust of even all three involved, maybe both the parties and whoever's mediating that, or the leader, and that the relationships and the people that you have invested in and built over time, it's not going to affect them. I often think about, and I can't remember where we learned this from, and you may know, where they talk about doing the hard so that it is easier down the road versus doing the easy and then it becomes hard. And I think what ends up happening is when conflict happens and we manage it, in the moment we feel like that's easy, and then it gets harder as it shows up, versus, man, we're going to get in, that's here, there's tension, let's resolve it, that's really hard, which I don't do really well. Like, I have to develop even better learned behaviors than I do to, in the moment, do it, and then it'll be easier as things like that might come up again down the road.
Hey, podcast listeners. Many of you listening right now would probably love the autonomy that comes with owning your own business or becoming a coach that helps other businesses succeed. Well, we have a phenomenal strategy where you are 100% in control of your own business, earning income on your own terms, and have access to the people, tools, and resources you need to build a thriving leadership development business. When you become a Maxwell Leadership Certified Team member, you join a global community of entrepreneurs led by our expert team of mentors and faculty, including John C. Maxwell. You'll also get one of the top leadership certifications in the world next to your name, giving you the boost you need to get started. Visit us online at maxwellleadership.com/join the team to find out more.
Oh, well, you and I are similar in our people-based, pleaser-based. We want to make people happy. We're strong relationship people. We really major on care, and we're not so good on candor. We have to really work hard to balance that care and candor that John talks about, and to say hard things. I also think another lesson I've learned about, can I protect the relationship, the connection over the content, no matter what I have to say.
That's a great statement.
Whatever, it works in marriage, by the way, at home, as well as in with relationship with kids and family. But it also works at work. Is no matter what I have to say, no matter how hard that discussion may be, can I protect our relationship? The connection over the content has been a big one for me. But maybe in the last few minutes, should we just give a couple of tactics on practical steps? I love you said about protect the trust, and the relationship should be our goal. We've got to resolve the conflict. And by the way, big learning, many leaders learn this the hard way, is if you don't address, if you do conflict management and don't resolve issues, it sends a message that this kind of behavior is okay, and you just put another design element into your culture. It's okay to act this way because, well, it must be the leader didn't address it. And so if you allow things to go on, or you think they'll get better over time, they don't, and it will just begin to fester in the organization, and people say, well, it must be okay to talk this way, to rebel this way, to push back this way, because the leader didn't do anything about it.
Let me jump in right here. Where I see that a lot, and it's a huge problem, is leaders, number one, they don't naturally want to resolve it. They're going to manage it. Sometimes they don't even manage it or address it on their top producers. And so they allow that behavior to keep going because they're like, oh, he's our number one individual contributor. He is our number one cost saving. He is, and they allow that to happen. And so to your point, and I just had that thought because I can think right now several different organizations that we're working with where you're going to have to make the tough decision to work through that and resolve it. Don't even manage it. Otherwise, you're going to have to let that individual contributor go who's a rock star because it's decaying the rest of your culture.
Yeah, for sure. Well, first, invite people that involved in the conflict to sit down with you. Don't let this go on. But the temptation most parties are going to have when there's conflict is to be right or to win, and this is not an acceptable outcome. Is the objective is really to work to find a path forward. So one person or one group's gonna have a thought, and the other one's gonna have another thought. Got to build those thoughts together, but we have to do that together. But you're gonna have to fight the desire for one group to want to be right or win. You see this a lot in the public square today in politics and things, is that I don't care how bad I burn you, I'm right. And we got to find that the path forward to resolve the conflict.
And as you're sitting down and you're having those conversations, you have to listen so that both sides feel heard. Like, what is it that they're saying? And then be empathetic to where they're coming from. I would sometimes hear people say, be empathetic to what they're feeling. That's hard for me because I don't have a whole lot of feelings sometimes. I become very, logical, and I can compartmentalize things in a hurry. It may have been a conversation last night with Sarah. I don't know. But I really, in that moment, you do have to sit down. Something I have to continue to work on myself and listen and let both parties kind of speak into that. And then when you're doing that and you're working through that, try to find some things that maybe there is a misunderstanding between the two of you. And then maybe there's some common ground. It may be a little bit of a stretch, but if you can find something, I think it'll go a long way as you think about resolving this conflict.
Another challenge and a temptation is to make it about the people instead of about the problem. And so I just encourage you to focus on the problem, and that there are people involved with the problem, but be curious. Curiosity, we've got a whole podcast on the miracle skill of curiosity. But if you're curious as you're mediating this, be curious. Curiosity keeps you from being judgmental. Curiosity keeps you from telling. It makes you ask. And I thought just keeping everything reasonable, respectful by being curious causes you to. I'm not judging. I want to know. I'm curious. Why do you think it goes this way?
Yeah,
exactly. You're teachable in this, and use questions, not statements, and it will to gain further understanding of things, and it will open the door to more openness with people.
That's good. Well, as we think about this, I also want to go to something that we talk about as a leadership team often, because I think you do need to have tension. You do need to have conflict in the leadership team. Now, we're not going to be in complete agreement, but find some areas that maybe you as a team or you and that individual where that conflict is that you are in agreement with, and develop a place to where you can leave that conversation. You guys feel aligned, and there's a plan going forward to help minimize when that tension shows up and you've resolved that conflict.
And final thought, don't forget to follow up. Just don't be silly enough to think that I did it. We sat down, we talked about it, that it was all handled, resolved, and will be wonderful going forward. I think it's easy to do that because especially if my personality was, let's just, enough said, let's get that, move on. Follow up, make sure that action's being taken, that any challenges have been healed, any bad feelings, we've got relationships reoccurring to overcome that.
One thing that reminded me of with the follow-up is I remember a situation I was leading kind of two employees that were at conflict, and we were working through some issues. And as part of the follow-up, I got them both back together, and I said, hey, can you just, what did you hear last week in our meeting that so-and-so said or thought? And then, hey, what did you hear, right? And I go, oh, man, I thought I had this thing resolved, but it is still a big, big gap. And so I love the fact you got to be intentional and follow up about that. One of the things as I wrap up that I want to share with you is we talk a lot about, and the basis of this podcast is built off of the 5 levels of leadership. We've seen the methodology transform leaders and cultures and organizations around the world. And when I think about it, this is where the importance of doing level 2 is so important for leaders. This is the foundation. You have to connect with your people. You have to build relationships. You've got to get them to the point where they give you permission to lead them. If you don't do that really well, then when you get into situations where there is conflict and you're trying to resolve it, there's not going to be any trust there. They're going to think that you have a bad motive for it. And even if it goes sideways and they don't have trust, your leadership credibility is going to be out the window in a hurry. Versus if you went about it the right way and you built the influence like we talk about, they're going to trust that there's something in there that Chris is saying or must be seen, and I trust him. And so I want to encourage you, just as we think about and we wrap up with the conflict, it all starts back to how you're increasing your influence, and make sure you do level 2 really, really well. The last thing is Perry and I, we both teach, and I know Greg Cagle kind of helped develop this course around discovering your authentic leadership style. And in there, we taught a principle called the intent versus perception gap. As you are working to resolve conflict, one of the things I want you to do is develop a common language that you use in these conversations. And we use this all the time. We say, hey, Perry, I know your intent was not to do this, but the perception of the team or the perception of the customer or the perception that I have as your leader is this. Can we talk about that?
Close that gap.
And close that gap. And as soon as we begin having conversations about closing that gap, that is resolving the conflict. And by the way you're starting is that by saying, hey, I know your intent was not to do that, you're already way ahead. Because now you're not managing emotions and tension right out of the gate. You may have to down the road as the conversations go. But man, think about what is the language to say, hey, I know your intent was not this. However, so-and-so perceived it like this. This is how they received it. Can we sit down and talk about that? And as leaders, you got to be responsible for closing that gap. And so it's a great common language for you to use while you're doing that.
Super. Thank you, Chris. And just a reminder, if you'd like to get that learner guide or learn about these offerings that we're talking about, you can do all of that at maxwellleadership.com/podcast. Also learn about our other podcasts in our family of podcast offerings. You can also leave us a comment or a question, which we love. We're also so grateful that you would spend this time with us today. That's all from the Maxwell Leadership Executive Podcast.